stand by for action.
Thanks for joining me. My name is Dave Milner. I am the Unpleasant Blind Guy, back from a little R&R from the news. We have to pace ourselves, my friends, because this war that we're in, metaphorical war, to try and inform people of the truth, is one where we're going to need to have all of our resources, and we cannot afford to burn ourselves out. So we have to allow time for the good things in life that make the battle worth fighting. All right, now let's get right to the first business of this show, which is to thank Sugarland Lala, or Sugarland Layla, however they choose to pronounce their name on the Twitter, for their comments on the last show's story about Anthony Weiner. And I encourage people who haven't listened to that show to go back and give it a listen. Yes, I know everybody's sick of hearing about Anthony Weiner, but as I normally do, I went back into some facts and figures about the guy and came up with some stuff that one might find very interesting, and certainly not anything that the big bugs were talking about. You know, I try and avoid that. Okay, now let's get into it. My main subject is going to be one that a lot of people don't expect. But then again, that's how this show rolls. Been seeing a lot of these advertisements for the movie Jobs. It's a film about Steve Jobs, one of Apple's creators. And from what I can tell in the promos, they try and make the guy look like some sort of mythical hero. And I'm here to try and debunk a little bit of this. And I want to say right now, if you love your Apple computer, you may not want to listen to this bit. You may want to skip ahead and listen to my Awesome Americans section. That one's pretty good. Yeah, just do that, because I'm going to talk a bit about Steve Jobs' concept and put it in a light that most people haven't put it in. First of all, I'm going to acknowledge some of the really basic things about Steve Jobs. Yes, the concept of Apple computers, or as they put it in their advertising years ago, the computer for the rest of us, was revolutionary. At the time, computers consisted of PCs and other such that people had to type commands into. This was the consumer market, of course. And Steve Jobs believed that he could sell a computer to the mass market using the graphical user interface, and that, quote-unquote, the rest of us would find that easier to use than nasty old personal computers that people had to learn commands to type in and make things happen on. So, we have to give him credit for that. But way too many people give Steve Jobs credit for inventing the graphical user interface. Nothing could be farther from the truth. Now, I am going to post, as I do every show, relevant articles from the web, and the one that I'm going to post this show is going to be the first GUIs, GUI being graphical user interface, the acronym for. And it's going to talk about how the actual inventor, the company of the graphical user interface, was Xerox. Yes, Xerox. Not Apple, Xerox. Okay, so that's the first legend that I think we can, pop a hole in and watch fly away like a little party balloon. All right. Now, the concept of, quote-unquote, the computer for the rest of us has certainly sold well. I know a lot of people who use Apple computers. I even know one who sells them, and they do work well for some people who are in graphic arts and things of that nature. However, I will point out that these computers aren't so much easier to use as appliances. They make the user dependent. A friend of mine read a story years ago, probably in the 1970s, in Analog Magazine, about how everyone was dependent on a wizard class. They had their technology, and it was great, but they had to depend on the wizards to keep it going. And that's pretty much the Apple concept. Yes, you've got an Apple computer, and yes, it works, and sometimes it does work better than a PC. However, if it breaks down, you're in trouble. You've got to take that thing to the Apple store and pay the geniuses to fix it. Same thing with these pad things or iPhones or anything of that nature. Pretty much all Apple products are very dependent on the personnel that are hired to fix them and not very repairable by their actual users. Now, I know there are people out there who are going to say that PCs are worse because they depend on Windows, which is and can be very clunky and that sort of thing. I'll point out that those are only people who don't bother to maintain their computers and don't want to spend a small amount of time learning how to use the hardware, replace the hardware, and repair the hardware. When you can do that, you can save a ton of money because along with the dependence that you purchase when you get an Apple computer, the other prize you win is spending more money than you might spend on a PC. And outside of the realm of personal computers, Apple products generally cost more money. So, you're spending more money and you're dependent on someone else. Now, I know a lot of people on the left like that, but personally I prefer a little bit of independence, and that's why I use a PC. Now, let's get this one argument out of the way now. If you use a PC, you have to use Windows. No, you don't. There's a perfectly good operating system, several versions of it in fact, that is being constantly updated right now, and it's free. It's called Linux. Yes, Linux. Again, an absolutely free operating system for the personal computer and for other platforms that is constantly being updated by people who just like to update this stuff and work on it and create something that's going to work well for them and for everyone else. And yes, it does have a nice pointy, clicky interface. In fact, more than one kind. You can select what kind you want, and that helps people who just want to point and click and don't want to bother with typing in commands and all that sort of ooga booga stuff that kept them away from computers before. Okay, having a PC can mean some frustration before you conquer the learning curve, but I'll tell you this, folks. I did it. You can do it. It doesn't take as much time as you think. And when you're done, you have more choices than you do with Apple. And a few more things about Mr. Jobs. After he died, one of the things that I heard was that his last words were, "Oh, wow, oh, wow, oh, wow." And the commentators talked about why this could possibly be some sort of wondrous insight or something like that. No, I don't think so. The guy was just dying. Okay? The other thing that I've heard is that Mr. Jobs was, quote-unquote, challenging to work with. Okay, guys, let me translate this for you in case you're not able to translate it for yourselves. Being challenging to work with means that he was a jerk. Now, a lot of famous inventors and innovators and big business people who have made a success of themselves are jerks. Let's face it. Sometimes it goes with the territory, sometimes not, but it happens often enough to where this isn't an unknown concept. However, I wanted to point this out because everyone's fascination with Steve Jobs and how cool he was might be a little bit more tempered if they realized that he was an ass to work with and for. Oh, and one more little thing. People talk about how Steve Jobs pushed independence. Let's face it, guys. The only independence Steve Jobs got to work, was his own. I'm guessing that people who worked for Steve Jobs weren't allowed to be very independent. Working for Steve Jobs, as working for Bill Gates, or many other types of people who run big businesses, was pretty much do what the boss says or get your butt fired. Okay, now, hopefully I haven't lost any listeners over that segment, but I did want to point out those few truths about Steve Jobs. No, he was not a hero. No, he did not create independence. He created dependence. He was a regular businessman who created a concept that ends in an overpriced product and dependence. So think about that. If you're a PC user, think about that the next time someone brags about their Apple. I want to make one final point. Some of you who use Apple computers say that you want the benefits of using a computer without the work involved in using a computer. And what can I tell you? It's a very old thing. Sometimes you have to put in the effort for something that you want. All right, you can't, for instance, become a master shade tree mechanic unless you're willing to pick up a wrench. There are some things that you can't do without going through the learning curve, and some people want a shortcut. Well, what can I say? You can call me a computer nerd if you want to. Frankly, I don't care what other people call me. But people like me went through the work, and people like me spend far less money and can wind up with far more computer, and we know what to do when that computer breaks down. And again, I'll say this, guys. This learning curve is not that steep, and it doesn't take that much time out of your life, and you actually do benefit in more independence and in having to spend less money. And for a tightwad like me, that's important. Now we're going to move on, and I want to thank everybody who is an Apple user and who went through this and listened to it for sticking in. I appreciate you, as I appreciate all of the people who listen to this show. And it's time, folks, for Awesome Americans. That's right. And the Awesome Americans I want to talk about are 11 veterans who gathered at the National Air Force Museum in Ohio on the week of the 70th anniversary of the Ploiești raid. This is from an AP story by Dan Sewell, and this was posted on July the 31st. Cincinnati, all these years later, some surviving veterans still think the raid on Hitler's gas station was a great plan. However, not all worked out as expected, and the result was a fierce World War II battle marked by bravery and sacrifice. The 70th anniversary Ploiești raid reunion this week at the National Museum of the U.S. Air Force commemorates an August 1, 1943 assault by waves of B-24 bombers on oil refineries in Romania that provided much of the fuel for the Nazi war machine. 5 medals of honor were among the many awards given for what U.S. military historians call the most decorated action of the war. U.S. commanders emphasized the importance of completing the mission. In their estimate, it would shorten the war in Europe by 6 months. Dale Halsey, 91, of Fort Worth, Texas, recalled Wednesday after reunion participants viewed a restored B-24 at the museum near Dayton. They tried to knock the thing out in one mission, but everything went wrong, said Bob Rands, a Chicago native who lives near Tampa at age 92, with vivid memories of being bathed in gasoline as a wall of flame roared toward him. The raid inflicted heavy but not devastating damage, and nearly a third of the 177 planes and their 1,726 men failed to make it back to their bases more than 1,000 miles away in North Africa. The Allies had tried bombing the oil fields before from high levels. Operation Tidal Wave was to be a surprise assault by a flying armada coming in under radar and methodically knocking out assigned targets. But navigational problems disrupted plans, and defenders on the ground were ready for them. Sweeping in just above corn stalks, we were so close to the ground it was like driving at high speed in an automobile, Halsey said. The bombers were met with a barrage of firepower. Halsey, a radio operator, remembers a continuous line of bright flashes from gunfire on the ground. Rand said anti-aircraft guns mounted on rail cars provided mobile defense against the bombers. An auxiliary fuel tank near Rand's was hit, showering him with gasoline. Fire engulfing his plane, he parachuted out. He was captured, treated in a hospital for burns, then put in a prison camp. Halsey said his plane knocked out its target and was headed home when shot down by fighter planes. The crew was found and protected by Yugoslav resistance fighters until a British rescue operation got them out nearly a year later. Rand and Halsey were among 11 raid veterans at the reunion, with nearly 100 family members and friends. Air Force history enthusiasts Mark Copeland of Lakeville, Minnesota, and Blaine Duxbury of Indianapolis helped organize it. Copeland said, after a 60th anniversary reunion in Salt Lake City, there was interest in coming together again for what likely will be the last reunion. About 70 of the mission participants are still alive, he said. Scott Stewart came from Lincoln, Nebraska, to pay tribute to the mission his late father, Carroll Stewart, wrote about in a 1962 book co-authored with James Dugan. Stewart said his father spent years chronicling the stories of veterans of the battle, including Germans and Romanians. Rand said the reunion, which will include a public memorial service Thursday, brought back memories, some tears, and a sense of pride for the veterans about their place in military annals. When you stop to think about it, you were part of an action that nobody else could ever be in again. The most highly decorated action of the war, Rand said. History is history. Now, there is a link at the bottom of this article for Operation Tidal Wave. I'm assuming that's the book, and you might want to take a look at that. There have been books written about the Ploiești Raid, and the Ploiești Raid has been mentioned in many other books and histories of World War II, and this is really a little chapter in the war that is worth note if you're at all interested. It's not widely known, but it really does show why these 11 veterans and all the veterans of World War II are awesome Americans. This is a generation that is beginning to disappear. Those who are in their 50s, like me, lived long enough to see the passing of the World War I generation, and now this is happening to the World War II generation. They deserve our thanks, our respect, and our recognition as the awesome Americans that they are. That's it for this show. I want to thank everyone for listening. There will be one again. Whatever happens, you should know that until the government decides to shut me down, whatever happens, the Unpleasant Blind Guy is not going away. I may take a week off here and there, but I will not be going away. Not until I have to. I want to thank you for listening again. Hope you have a wonderful week. Hope you have an excellent weekend. Thank you, and may your God go with you. Bye-bye.